What is going on, Tentacle Crew? My name is Billy the Skwid, and today I want to talk about Dark Souls 3 Cinders Mod. This is my review of the mod coming from somebody who just completed a full run, experienced pretty well everything that the mod has to experience as far as the actual gameplay aspects of it. I did not go into very much build variety because my playthrough was from a pure magic standpoint. Not a single physical weapon was used because this mod lets you do that, and that's my first selling point of this mod, but we'll get into more specifics on why that is such a big deal here later. Just to make it clear also, this is the 2.09 version of the mod. I do not know how much more they are planning on doing with this mod or how much they're planning on overhauling it or keeping up with it in the future, but this is the version of the mod that I am reviewing it from. I know a lot of changes have been made since Cinders first came out up to where it is now, and there's the potential for them to change a lot in the future, so just wanted to make that disclaimer very clear from the beginning. So welcome on in, everybody, from the Tentacle Crew, and meet my battle mage. If you have not checked out our live streams that we've been doing of the Cinders Mod run that we do every morning around 9:30 Eastern Time, this is what we ended up with at the end of our magic-only run. A battle mage covered in heavy armor, very nice stat growth, a huge plethora of spells at our disposal that we can go through pretty well any way that we want to. And it was just an all-around amazing time. And the number one thing I want to bring up about this mod and what this mod does better than any mod that I have experienced so far is the way that it pretty well allows you free reign of any playstyle that you want. In the vanilla Souls games and stuff like that, being that magic isn't something that is regenerated over time, your FP bar does not regen over time. You will occasionally get flasks back from killing enemies, but those are randomized. This game allows you to actually have a pure caster build in the fact that it has FP regen, and I know that this is a balancing contingency that they wouldn't necessarily be able to use in the vanilla versions of Dark Souls 3 or any games coming up forward like Elden Ring. Elden Ring's kind of worked out a different way of regening FP that is a risk-reward type situation, which I think works for that game. But as far as this game goes, you just right from the get-go have FP regen. It takes a little while from the time you exit combat to it actually starting to regen or you stopping doing an ability. Before it starts to regen, there are items in the game that allow that to be increased or decreased. But just given that, right from the get-go, you are able to have a spellcaster build if you don't mind waiting a little bit in boss rooms sometimes. And that gets circumvented later as your build expands. I just want to note as well that this also makes it so that weapon arts are more freely to be used because you're actually able to get those FP resources back without having to necessarily spec directly into an FP resource, because as far as Dark Souls 3 goes, the FP stat of attunement tended to be exclusively for magic users just because this is how you also got attunement slots. So if you were speccing into this with any other class that didn't really want to use magic that much, it felt like you were only getting 50% of the stats value. So if I had to describe the Cinders mod in one single phrase, it would be the expansion Dark Souls 3 endgame deserves. This is a way of enhancing the Dark Souls 3 experience without changing it in any major or massive way. As far as like the story beats go, the pacing of the game goes, the areas themselves, they don't really mess with that. Yes, there is boss balancing to kind of go along with all the weapon and spell balancing that they've done, because they went in and they completely retuned every spell that the base game had, every weapon that the base game had, and then they added a ton of weapons, armors, and spells that were not available in the base game so that you could use all of those. Just going to go into my weapons here just to give you a little rundown of all of the weapons that you could potentially get within this game. And it just keeps going. And as far as the armors go, they did a really neat thing with the armors to actually make it so that armors are more meaningful than just defensive stats, which, let's be real here, Fashion Souls trumps all. But now you have the option to have both functionality and fashion with your armor. If I go in here to my masks selection, you will see I have a ton of masks, plenty of which you probably have never seen in Dark Souls 3 because they weren't in Dark Souls 3. But the cool thing about armor in this game is while they do have these stat locations, they also have bonus effects. Every single piece of armor has a bonus effect linked to it. This Raven mask gives me 5% big ol' 5 skis to my FP reserve. So the more FP that I pump points into, the higher reward I am going to get from this piece of armor itself. And as you can see, the big hat gives the same thing. Sorcerer's Hood gives the same thing. Mask of Velka, same thing. So you have fashion options to get similar results. We go over to my armor, which is the Gloom armor. It also gives my 5% FP regen. But this is something that I found really, really nice in the fact that I have basically a battle mage sorcerer, heavy armor, 69% weight ratio. So I just barely am still within that mid-roll range. But I have the defenses of a fully kitted out tank. As you can see, these defense stats aren't much to scoff at, you know what I mean? As compared to your typical mage robes, where I am losing basically 10 points of defense on every single one of my sets, bar the magic stat. And it's just really cool. It's really neat that they give you that option, give you armor pieces that aren't just like your standard mage robes, but you also get some battle mage style gear. And as we go up through here, the Ruins armor gives me 5% HP increase, dexterity increased by 2 points, strength increased by 2 points, weapon stamina consumption reduced by 5%, and it just keeps going. There are so many unique effects to these armors that you really can mix and match what you want for your specific build. For me personally, like I said, I was a pure caster. I had the FP regen on my helmet and chest piece, as well as a little bit on my gauntlets. I went back and forth with the gauntlets with FP regen and actually some armor up here that does dark damage. Wilhelm's gauntlets were really, really good. There's quite a few different damage modifying armor pieces as well, such as dark damage, lightning damage, fire damage, so on and so forth. And then Carless trousers, which was another FP regen. But for these, I was actually kind of going a little bit of casting speed for a good majority of the game, until I got my Covenant completely leveled up, and it pretty well negated my need for having a casting speed armor set. That is right, Covenants have been completely reworked in this mod so that they provide a huge, huge benefit to your stats, as well as opening up a vendor to get various things from them. So the way the Covenants work, as you can see here, I get 30 casting speed just by having Pilgrims of the Dark equipped. And there are a ton of different Covenants that they all do different things. Mailmakers gives physical damage by a percentage, FP regen, stamina consumption, so on and so forth. All the Aldrich Faithful, and each one of those goes from a 1 to 5 tier. Why is that significant? How are you able to do this? Covenants in the base game were kind of a pain in the butt to level up in some situations. Well, the way this game works around it, since the majority of players, I would assume, aren't going to have online accessibility, you can set it up for online, but that's opening your account up to being banned, and if you don't have a side account, it could be very, very risky to do so. But the way they get around that is they've pretty well completely negated the online functionality of most of the Covenants. Covenants in this game are very much a stat building, or if you have something in their shop that you want, you go out and get that. So the only thing you need to do is have that Covenant equipped, and then by going out and killing enemies, you will get items that will let you level up on that Covenant. Any enemy is going to drop these, so you don't need to necessarily go to a specific area and farm the same enemies over and over to get those stats increased. And then once you get it, so many of these items, you can either spend them on in-shop, like the Covenant shop items, or you can go and level yourself up in the Covenant, which will increase your the effect that the Covenant has. So I think this one started out as 5, and it goes all the way up to 30 after I have leveled it up to +5. Very cool. It gives you a good reason to actually want to go and use these Covenants and kind of mix and match them as if they were part of your build, as if they were a ring that you could just equip. And let me tell you, there are a ton of different rings in this game as well. As you can see down here, Ring of Vengeance, Spite. This is an entire ring line based on damage that applies to your rolls in your kicks. If you wanted to do a Armor of Thorns build with magic attached to it, you could technically do that. If you wanted to do the Night Slayer ring that makes your kicks really throw shields, or is it the hoof horse hoof ring. I can't remember, but that is also viable in this game. But I could go on and on about the items that this mod opens up because there are far too many to actually get into. But how does it actually play? Well, like I said, the game pretty well rebalances every single spell, every single enemy, and it actually gives enemies a little bit of soft scaling to you. So if you go back to prior areas, you are going to have they're going to hit a little bit harder. Also, just a fun fact, this area actually has a targeting dummy now, so that you can test out new weapons, new spells, and the like. One of my personal favorites is Fecal Expulsion, where I vomit shit onto enemies that causes them to take the toxic status effect. Or good old Moonlight, which makes a giant Moonlight greatsword appear. That also, which you can't see because of that, shoots out a little projectile from it. Very, very cool. I could go on and on all day about the spells and the weapons of this game, but the last thing I really want to hit on is they brought in some aspects from other games. Not only armor items from like Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, and the like, but they also have a complete Bloodborne Master Benji character that lets you purchase a select few of the Bloodborne weaponries. Now, these weapons do not behave in quite the same way that they do in Bloodborne. They don't have the trick weapon stylings to them. They more or less are base like weapon style movesets grafted with these weapons, like the model of the weapons on them. And they also have like their own independent scalings and stuff. The weaponries and stuff, you have your guns, you have your shotgun, you have your Rosmarius, those kinds of things, all very, very cool. I thought it was really neat that even though there's not a trick weapon styling, they do have both the Burial Blade and the Burial Scythe, so you get both forms of the Burial set for just to be able to switch back and forth to. Wish they would have done that with the Rokkoyo, having like the double-bladed Rokkoyo and then like the Akimbo Rokkoyos, but you can't have everything. Another thing that this guy does is he allows you to, if you have fast rolling on, you actually get the Hunter's Dash, and you can transmog your armor to look like a hunter from Bloodborne. A Bloodborne run is something that I do plan on doing in the future, so if you are interested in seeing that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It'll be live most likely, but definitely a Bloodborne run of Cinders coming up at some point. But yes, weapons, spells, all re-leveled. Enemies, all re-leveled. Soft scaling, all re-leveled. Bosses completely reworked as far as their stats go. There are a few bosses that they altered in some meaningful ways, but most of the bosses function, as far as the base game bosses go, in the exact same way that they did, just with their stats slightly shifted to make them more of a challenge for this extreme power that you can get from some of the builds in the Cinders mod. And I think they did a very well job with that. None of the bosses felt overpowered, but none of the bosses felt like they were a breeze to walk through. As well as that, there are a few optional bosses that the game does give you that I thought were pretty neat. And they also have this system where you can go back, and after you beat a boss, you get the tome of that boss. So you can go back in and you can fight these bosses over and over again. Not only does this give you a viable method for farming the bosses, but you can also get the boss souls so that if there's something that you were split between with a boss soul, you don't have to do another playthrough to get that. You can go refight the boss, get that boss soul, transmode it, and you are good to go. There are some new bosses in this game that I thought were really, really neat. And I'm going to kind of showcase one of the first ones that popped out because it surprised the hell out of me when it did. You know this area, right? Undead Settlement, you run across the bridge, you're going to hop up here to get some dank loot. There's some dogs behind the building. And what do you run into? The door locks behind you as soon as you go up to this chest. And a boss bar appears. And what is it? It's this guy. Arbor, or Abor, or whatever he is. He's basically a Wing Knight moveset with some of the armor pieces from the Gyurm Warriors from Dark Souls 2. I thought this was a really, really neat addition to the game, and I thought just by seeing him in this game, it really set the bar for what they were going to be doing with some of the encounters of this game. And as you can see, he thunks. He's not very, like, tanky, because he's an earlier game version of these optional bosses, but he do thunk. And this is part of that that like soft scaling that the game does to you. He was hurting me about this much whenever I first fought him, as he is now at an end-game build. So that is kind of some of the things. I don't want to spoil too many of the surprises for you. That is some of the things that you can expect from this mod as far as optional enemies. There's quite a few optional enemies. Every single one of them, I think, is very well done. They do recycle moves that you've seen from other enemies within the game. So the movesets are going to be familiar. It's just kind of lining them up. They do alternate the attack speeds on some of these moves so that they're not going to behave specifically like you remember. And some of the movesets are very intricately redone. There is a super boss at the end of the game that takes the boss that it's modeled off moveset and shifts how everything works within that moveset. So you'll recognize the individual pieces, but the combinations that it throws at you may throw you for a loop. I know it did for me. As far as those covenants that I talked to you about earlier, all of the covenant leaders, for the most part, show up in the Firelink Shrine area that you are able to interact with at any point. There are also random vendors throughout the area that will enhance your spells or your weapon arts or anything like that. Basically, if you are pretty proficient in a field of magic, say you're doing a lot of great lightning spear, and you want to make that spell really punch a bit more, you can go to this specific vendor and he will enhance your great lightning spear to have a bonus effect to it. As well as, this mod definitely feels like it was more catered towards making magic playstyles more fun. They removed the ability to enhance your catalyst as far as leveling it up goes, but you are able to do different kind of enchantments with your catalyst. So as you can see here, I have Kytha's throbbing chime. No innuendo intended, but that is what the description goes. And if you go over here to Andre, because you can level up, upgrade your weapons, do anything at a bonfire, you don't have to go back to Firelink to do any of that. It makes it so that you never have to jump out of the action, which I think is very nice. But he has descriptions of all of the different infusions, and catalyst infusions do all of the following. This is what you're going to do with your catalyst in place of leveling them up. Weapons still level up as they usually would, as do the infusions, although there are some tweaks to the infusions that I'm not going to get into because I didn't play around with them that much, but they are there. So at the end of the day, would I recommend the Cinders mod? For somebody that has played through Dark Souls 3 time and time again, and you are looking for that kind of an experience, but you want it to be brought to the next level, this is the perfect mod for you. It is very much familiar to a standard Dark Souls 3 experience, but it allows you to have that power fantasy in a different way. Like I said, going into this, I knew FP Regen was going to be a thing, so I wanted to make a pure caster build, and this game allowed me to do that and have a hell of a lot of fun doing it. As I said before, I'm going to do a Bloodborne build on this game because the Bloodborne characters, weapons, look is there, and I want to try that playstyle out in a Dark Souls 3 setting. There's also a few side items that you can do, where if you go over to this guy, you can do kind of a an arena type thing where different areas will have different enemies. Each memory takes you to basically an infinite spawn room where you fight an arena style of enemies from that environment. I thought that was really neat. It's a way for you to get primordial fragments, which this bear boy here will happily take from you to do some bonus things to your gear. So if you were wanting that familiar Dark Souls 3 experience with enough unique aspects, some bosses changed, but a ton of new bosses, new side quests, and stuff like that, I highly, highly recommend that you give this mod a try. It goes above and beyond to really provide that next level of Dark Souls 3 experience without changing the formula too much. There are plenty of mods out there that will completely shift how you traverse through the game. It will completely change like what the intended pathing is of the game, change the bosses. This mod never went out of its way to do that because it is not the intention. This is just Dark Souls 3 plus, if you will, and I could not recommend it enough. So if you guys are interested in more Dark Souls modded content, let me know what you want to see down in the comments below. We're going to be starting up very soon the Convergence mod of Dark Souls 3, so if you are interested in that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. But more Dark Souls, Souls-like content will be on the way. Regardless, much love, Tentacrew. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.